Welcome to the Orthocast. Today our guest is Mike Lacey. He's an Orthodox convert who converted many decades ago in 2004, and he also has helped with a prison ministry, ministering as an Orthodox Christian to people at the Supermax. And he's got lots of great stories that we're going to get into. So thank you, Mike, so much for joining me here today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah. So my first question for you is, what was your upbringing like? Were you raised with any religion? Did you ever fall away from whatever faith you were raised in?
Um, I was brought up as a Roman Catholic,
Hmm.
and my parents were very young when they had me. My father was 19, and my mother was barely 17 when I was born. Um, and when my dad came back from Vietnam, uh, they were very active in our local Catholic parish. Um, and the local parish priest there, he was a great priest.
Hmm.
And like many Roman Catholics of that era, late Vietnam, post Vietnam, I went to Catholic schools, and we were brought up to be not only soldiers for Christ, but soldiers that went out and killed the godless communists.
Hmm.
As evidence of that, in my fifth grade class, I think there were about 18 boys, and I think 15 of us ended up enlisting in the 80s. And that
Wow.
was
Hmm.
very common for those of us brought up in Roman Catholic schools to enlist in the U.S. military.
Nice.
Um, they were active in youth groups, things like that. But uh, eventually they ended up falling away,
Hmm.
um, as did a lot of people. And it was, I was brought up outside Chicago in a very religiously diverse neighborhood, where I had friends and neighbors who were Muslims. I had friends and neighbors who were Jews.
Hmm.
In fact, my childhood, I probably spent just as many, maybe more hours at inside a Jewish home growing up as a kid. In fact, when I was in eighth grade, I even attended a uh, a Jewish summer camp called Camp Try in Baraboo, Wisconsin, and I
Oh.
was the first Gentile to attend this camp. Um,
Wow.
and yeah, and all through my adult life, I've through my business career, um, I've always been mistaken for being Jewish.
Really?
Um,
Oh.
yeah, and in Chicago, I was hired by a once, two, maybe three times by Jewish businessmen who just assumed I was Jewish when they met me. You know,
Wow.
it, I wasn't trying. you know, whenever I was asked, it's like, no, I'm a Catholic, I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
But if you just, I was always able to pass.
Hmm.
Um, so I was brought up Catholic, and I was also exposed to the Orthodox Church very early
Mm.
when I left Catholic schools and went to public schools, especially in high school because there were a bunch of Greek kids
Hmm.
where I went to school. And when I was a teenager, at that time, you had to do service before you were confirmed in the Catholic Church. So I spent about a year, maybe 2 years, volunteering for Meals on Wheels as part of the service in order to be confirmed.
Hmm.
And as I'm going through all this, uh, I was having a lot of doubts about the Catholic faith,
Yeah.
even then as a teenager. And so much so that as a teenager, about 2 weeks before I was scheduled to be confirmed, I decided I can't do this. I'm not going to do it. And my CCD instructor didn't know what to do. That had never happened before. And a priest called me back right away and actually thanked me for being honest.
Wow.
because he said he knew that there were a lot of kids up there who were going to be confirmed and they're just doing it for the party. And he thanked me for being honest about it. You
Yeah.
know, I told him, I said, I don't really fully believe everything the Catholic Church teaches. You know,
Mhm.
I've got you know, in my 16-year-old mind before the internet, I had a problem with the married priesthood. Or correction, I had a problem with the celibate priesthood.
Mhm.
I had a lot of. I also understood that the church had changed, that the sacraments had been separated. I was uh, blessed with a father who could have been a history professor. I mean, he read history textbooks for leisure. That was his fun thing,
Yeah.
and so I mean, he just growing up just imbued me with a love of history, along with just a lot of historical facts. And one of the facts that I was just brought up with as a child was that yeah, the Greek Orthodox, they're older than the Roman Catholic Church. Yeah,
Mhm.
my dad was just straight up with it.
Mhm.
And also too, there was more honesty among Roman Catholics back in, you know, 30, 40, 50 years ago, where they would admit, you know, well, yeah, you know, the Greeks and what they do, it is older. And
Yeah.
also too, when you I was always one thing the Catholic faith gave me was a love of the saints.
Mhm.
And I was always studying the early saints and martyrs.
Wow.
And the more I studied them, the more I realized it's like, wait a second, this isn't Catholicism, you know.
Yeah.
And I just knew that. So I started asking the Greek Orthodox kids, you know, what's it take to be Orthodox? And they all told me it's like, well, you got to be Greek or marry one to become Orthodox.
Oh.
I'm like, okay. So there was a Greek fest that their parish had, and I went to a couple of their priests,
Mhm.
and I asked them, you know, the kids at school, they tell me I got to be Greek, you know, or marry one to become Orthodox. Is that true? And the priests laughed, and you know, like, no, no, that's not true. But and then they're like, but you really wouldn't be comfortable with us because everything's in Greek. So
Wow.
you know, if the priest tells me I'm not going to be comfortable in his parish, then I'll take his word for it. And
Yeah.
so that was my first contact to Orthodox Christianity, and it took another 22 years, you know, before
Wow.
I finally came into the church.
Wow.
Um, and I mean, yeah, that was my upbringing, you know, as far as religiosity. I continued to be a communing Catholic. I just wasn't confirmed.
Mm.
And there's a lot of Roman Catholics
Yes.
or in similar situations, you know. And when I first got married, we were married in the Catholic Church, and uh, my first wife, Catherine, who has since proposed, um, she was Catholic, so we were married in the church. In fact, we were married by her cousin.
Wow.
And when we converted, I have to say that her cousin, the priest who married us, was probably the most supportive family member about us becoming Orthodox. And
Wow.
he indicated that were he younger, he would probably move himself.
Wow.
Um, and this is back 20 plus years ago.
Mhm.
Also, too, at that time, there was nothing available really to speak of. My
Mhm.
first priest, he was so excited um, to be able to hand us a copy of the Orthodox Study Bible because it had just come out, but it was still just the New Testament only, you
Yeah.
know, and it had just come out, and he was so excited. Besides that, you had the writings of Blessed Father Seraphim Rose, Archbishop Callisto Ware's book, and then
Mhm.
Father Peter Gilchrist's book, and I think that was it. That
Wow.
was pretty much it. Um, there is one book that I found in my library that is absolutely fantastic, though. It's not theological.
Mhm.
It's written by a former BBC presenter. His
Mhm.
last name is French. I believe his first name is David. the name of the book, and I highly recommend this book as far as a convert looking to embrace the spirituality of Orthodox Christianity, because he was a presenter for the BBC for 14 years, and he had a comparative religion show.
Mm-hmm.
And as I recall from the book, he said after 14 years, he interviewed two different popes a number of times. He'd interviewed the Dalai Lama, and he listed off all these, global religious figures.
Yeah.
And he said, and I walked away from it all as a hopeful agnostic.
Mm.
And the book is, if you appreciate British dry humor and wit, it's absolutely fantastic because it reads like a travel log. He married a Greek woman,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the story of them leaving London and then moving to Greece, and then specifically to the island of Patmos.
Mm-hmm.
And they eventually leave all of the materialism behind, and they end up becoming two married ascetics living in a stone hut in Patmos. And
Wow.
it's the happiest and most fulfilled he's ever been. It's a fantastic book. It's, like I said, it's not theological, it's a quick read. It's very inspiring. I think it's a fantastic book for married couples to read and share together, because it's a story of an Orthodox couple at the end of their lives together,
Mm-hmm.
and how they do that. And it's a beautiful story. It
Yeah.
really is. I highly recommend it.
Yeah. It sounds beautiful. And so, throughout this time, when did that opportunity to look into Orthodoxy and like reconsider it? Because you kind of got pushed away for cultural reasons, unfortunately. And it's like it seemed like you had that desire from a young age at 16, being interested in that. And so, for so long as a Catholic interested in Orthodoxy, when were you able to become Orthodox?
When I personally, eventually, uh, I served in the Army National Guard, U.S. Army,
Mm-hmm.
from 85 to 93. And uh, in 1995, Christmas, I almost died from the Gulf War vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
Spent several days in hospital. And as a result of all that and everything else, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to be like every other Catholic, and I'll just go along with it. So I went and got chrismated,
Mm-hmm.
and I tried to become more active in the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
And I got involved with a program that they had for laymen in apologetics. This
Mm.
was in the yeah, so this is in the mid '90s. So
Yeah.
my diocese had this apologetics program for laymen,
Mm-hmm.
and when I was in that program, one of the things I was really interested in was uh, the canons of the first councils of the first millennium,
Wow.
because I saw a lack of sanctity in regards to approaching the Eucharist.
Mm-hmm.
I was brought up. I mean, I was an altar boy for a number of years, and I was trained in the Tridentine Mass.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the Eucharist has always been, well, look, I've been accused by Roman Catholic clergy of being in the cult of the Eucharist. Um, and I was very concerned about the lack of reverence, receiving in the hand,
Mm-hmm.
just everything I saw, because I can remember back before that happened. I was the altar boy, holding the discos,
Mm-hmm.
underneath the chin.
Yeah.
I can remember Father Miller turning people away at 6 a.m. mass, telling them that they smelled like coffee and cigarettes,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
come back tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I remembered that, and that's how I was brought up. Where it's the body of Christ, and you fast and you prepare yourself, and how I saw just the whole lack of reverence
Mm-hmm.
and lack of love and fear and trembling when approaching the Eucharist.
Mm-hmm.
It upset me.
Yeah.
and I thought maybe I can find an answer to that somewhere in the councils and canons of the first millennium.
Hmm.
And this again, this is before the internet. You couldn't just Google this stuff, okay?
Yeah.
And you had to get permission, if you will, to even study this stuff, as a Catholic, especially in that program. So I remember I finally I got some books through the program, and I opened the first one up, and I read canons 4, 6, and 7 from the first council at Nicaea in
Hmm.
325 AD.
Hmm.
And if anyone looks at those, I don't know how anyone can look at those and say, yeah, papal supremacy is a real thing,
Hmm.
because it doesn't exist anywhere in the councils and canons of the first millennium church.
Hmm.
There is no way that someone can look at the first millennium and say that, papal supremacy and papal infallibility and everything that, marks the Catholic Church as being Catholic today,
Hmm.
was part of the original church in the first 1,000 years. You just can't do it.
Yeah.
Um, so I was, as Protestants are prone to say, convicted,
Hmm.
by that realization.
Hmm.
But when you're married and you have children, it's not just you,
Yeah.
and you know, you have to come, as a package, at least ideally.
Yeah.
And but especially when you're the father, and you know, you're the husband. You're supposed to be the leader.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, for myself, I lacked that moral authority to be the leader in my household. To say no, we're going to go to this church, and have my wife and children, all agree and say we're going to trust dad. I just didn't have the authority. I didn't. I really didn't have much of a prayer life.
Hmm.
I really didn't. I was active in the church. I went regularly, but I didn't have a prayer life.
Hmm.
There were events that happened in the parish that we attended that were absolutely horrible and horrific,
Hmm.
crimes against children
Oh no.
in the very parish, in the rectory of the parish where we were at. And after that, my wife just couldn't bring herself to bring the children there anymore, and neither could I. In fact, it wasn't just that one event. I don't know. Can we get into details about this?
Yeah,
Uh,
sure.
okay. Uh, yeah, there was a priest who wasn't assigned to the parish, but he was living in the rectory, who was charged and eventually convicted of horrible crimes against two young teenage girls in the rectory.
Hmm.
And uh, it wasn't so much that the charges and the arrest happened, it was the response afterwards that
Hmm.
absolutely repelled not only us as a family, but this was a Catholic mega parish, if you will.
Hmm.
Uh, the church could hold easily 5 to 700. I
Wow.
think there are about 5,000 souls listed in it. Um, it was a mega parish,
Hmm.
with one priest,
Wow.
and the homily that he gave that Sunday after his housemate uh, was arrested was just absolutely disgusting. About
Mm.
half the parish just never showed up again.
Wow.
And on top of that, um, uh, the diocese barred people from that parish from enrolling their children in school or CCD in any other parishes.
Oh gosh.
So, so it wasn't because people tried. People tried to. I'm going to go to this parish. I'm going to go to this parish instead. And yeah, you could attend, but if you wanted to enroll your children in anything, you weren't allowed to. So that was it.
Hmm.
My wife at the time, uh, Catherine, rest her soul, was fell into depression about
Mm-hmm.
that, and for a while there, we just didn't attend.
Yeah.
Um, it was just a dead space in our family, and that was again, my lack of moral authority.
Mm-hmm.
And then got word that my father uh, had cancer and was terminal,
Wow.
and my dad died. My father is one of more than 300,000 U.S. GIs who served in Vietnam and then died from Agent Orange.
Mm-hmm.
If I could just take a moment here, this is a fact that Americans are completely ignorant of. If you were to Google, or if you were to go to the VA site, the VA has these numbers. They pay benefits to the survivors. Okay. If you go to the VA and search their website trying to find out how many GIs were affected by Agent Orange, good luck. Good luck finding it uh, without using a VPN and going to foreign sources. But the number that is that I've come up with is there's over 300,000 Vietnam veterans who were killed with Agent Orange. They all died from it. So whenever we hear these numbers that Vietnam killed 57,000, that's just from the combat. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's over 350,000. It's closer to 400,000 GIs were killed in Vietnam,
Mm-hmm.
and the government has done an excellent job in coordination with the media of keeping those facts away from people because who's going to want to volunteer if they know that the Pentagon has killed more GIs than any foreign enemy ever has.
Yeah.
So we got word that my father was going to die, or rather, he chose to die. In that he was given a choice of, we can make you comfortable and you'll live for about a year,
Mm-hmm.
and or there's this new treatment, and the 5 year survival rate's 50%, but it's going to be hellacious, and there's no guarantee, and the survival rate's only 50%.
Mm-hmm.
So at the age of 58, um, my dad chose to be comfortable and die in 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
And that began a whole process for me where I just about lost my mind um, for a lot of reasons. And
Mm-hmm.
uh, I knew that for the sake of our kids, we needed to get with the church.
Mm-hmm.
And Catherine very much wanted to go to one of these Protestant mega churches that had come up.
Mm-hmm.
That's where a lot of Catholics went to, actually, from that parish when that happened.
Yeah.
And when I explained to her that they don't honor the Holy Theotokos, the Virgin Mary, that they only bring her out at Christmas,
Mm-hmm.
um, she's like, okay. And that's when Google existed then, and I googled American Orthodox Church,
Mm-hmm.
and I was instantly linked to the OCA website.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, the OCA Q&A section was like a great source for information. I mean, it was like the best source of information.
Yeah.
And I remember I wrote the OCA, told them where I was, is there a church near me? And lo and behold, it turns out that there was a parish 20 minutes from us, and the communications director of the OCA was the parish priest. Uh,
Wow.
and yeah, that's Father John Matusiak of blessed memory.
Mm-hmm.
So, and so we showed up, And I have to say, for anyone who's a Catholic, they can probably appreciate this. Um, it's one thing to visit an Orthodox church as a tourist. If you're just there to take a look at the icons, or if you're just there for a wedding or something like that.
Mm.
But when you go to an Orthodox church with the intention of, okay, I think we want to become Orthodox, and you're a Roman Catholic, there's a feeling that you get.
Mhm.
It's all this Catholic, you know, guilt and propaganda that comes across you, and then as soon as you walk in, as soon as you smell the incense and walk inside, it all goes away. So
Yeah.
uh, that was I I wept uh, the first time I saw Orthodox Christians receiving the Eucharist.
Mhm.
I literally wept. Uh, and Catherine was moved too. And afterwards, on the way home, we asked the kids, it's like, it's not your decision, it's ours, but
Mhm.
what do you think? And then
Mhm.
our eldest one, Leanne, said, I felt closer to God.
Wow.
And, you know, from the mouths of children. Uh, and that pretty much summed it up, I think, for all of us. And we were probably were the world record as far as catechumen period, because our catechumen period lasted like 6 weeks. And
Wow.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
well, in hindsight, it wasn't necessarily the best thing, but
Mhm.
it seems to be what God willed.
Mhm.
I At the time, I mean, at the time, uh, for the I was at a job that was only 5 minutes from my house.
Mhm.
And this was a period in my career. Most of my career, I was on the road, traveling five
Yeah.
days a week. Um, I was a sales executive.
Mm.
And during this period, though, I was working 5 minutes from my home. I was spending a lot of time with my kids. And the church was only 20 minutes away. So I was attending, Vespers on, you know, Wednesdays and Fridays, and I was there Saturdays. And I think Father John was very impressed with me
Mhm.
because, uh, the lay Orthodox, weren't even coming that frequently.
Yeah.
Um, but uh, it was a wonderful experience when we were all welcomed in. And I wasn't ready for my father to die, though.
Mhm.
That really uh, set me off the deep end. I was not prepared in any way, shape, or form for that. By the time my father died, my mother and father had fallen so far away that they had even paid for an abortion for a family member, uh, not me. Uh, and when I arrived, I was there with my dad when he died.
Mhm.
And uh, when I arrived there, he told me that he didn't believe in God. There's nothing after we die, and that hurt.
Yeah.
And thankfully, there was a local Orthodox parish there, and the priest there was absolutely wonderful during this time. Because uh, yeah, I went down by myself. It was just myself, my mother, and my father. And
Mhm.
hospice care at that point in time in Georgia. Well, I'll just say that the very first thing that the hospice nurse did when she talked to me on the phone is she apologized. She apologized for the standard of care that they had because hospice is basically just a nurse on the phone. So we were there for him in his hospital bed, uh, and when he died of lung cancer, and
Mhm.
uh, when he died, his lungs failed, and it was a horrible death. It
Mhm.
was absolutely horrible, and uh, everything that the the church teaches, that our souls are escorted by angels and or demons when we
Mm-hmm.
depart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I believe it. I absolutely believe it because uh, that 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 was no Hollywood death. It really wasn't, and it was yeah, it was absolutely horrible. Um, yeah, so yeah, so horrible that in my willfulness, I determined that my father had chosen to die because he was in an unhappy marriage, and I had decided that I wasn't going to share his fate, and that when I was 58, I would want to choose to live. I didn't want to choose to die,
Yeah.
and yeah, I just went off the deep end. I also took another job where I was traveling a lot, and within less than a year of being chrismated, I was already separated from my wife and committing adultery. Um, yeah, it was just a horrible, horrible time. And
Yeah.
then sometimes God taps you on the shoulders, and sometimes He breaks your back
Yeah.
because a
Okay.
few months into this sinful state, I got rear-ended by an off-duty cop on the south side of Chicago who
Mm.
was doing 50 in a 25
Oh
and
gosh.
ended up breaking my back.
Oh my.
And oh yeah, and then that began an almost a decade long struggle of just struggle. Just oh, I just I absolutely failed my first 10 years in the church. Absolutely failed. Anything you could do wrong, I did wrong. The only thing I did right was I kept going to church. Um,
Yeah.
when uh, I did withdraw myself from the Eucharist in my sinful state.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in fact, I was separated from the Eucharist for a total of 7 years.
Wow.
Um, but I still kept going.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, to people who see someone in their parish who's going through a rough time, and you might not understand what they're doing, what's going on in their life, or why, you just, you know that they're going through a rough time and they still show up. Keep
Yeah.
praying for them. You
Yeah.
know, uh,
Exactly.
it, it works. Um, so uh, I ended up returning back to the marital home uh, just in time for surgery, and uh, I spent about 9 months uh, learning how to walk again, do everything again.
Mm-hmm.
I had one of those uh, turtle type back braces that you see people with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was just a horrible time. It was also my third surgery that I'd had. The other two were in the exact same spot. They were minor compared to the fusion surgery that I had. And
Mm.
along with all of that, like tens of millions of other Americans, I was prescribed OxyContin for pain, mostly because Western doctors really don't know how to deal with pain.
Yeah.
Um, so I was on OxyContin for about 10 years. And during this time, uh, I worked as some people might say a high level sales executive for American manufacturing companies.
Mm-hmm.
And during this time, it was for the first time in my life, it was difficult for me to maintain employment. Uh, I don't know how much of that was the oxy that I was taking. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know how much of that was just the physical pain, the spiritual pain, and I do know a lot of it was just plain the economy.
Mm-hmm.
Working for American manufacturers for the last uh, 30 years, has been like working in the trenches of an economic war.
Yeah.
Um, I'm thankful that I was one of the uh, sales executive types who was never really motivated much by money.
Mhm.
I got more satisfaction out of uh, seeing that my neighbors and fellow Americans, were gainfully employed.
Mhm.
Um, you know, the biggest thing I like to see was, a sign that we were hiring, because I brought
Mhm.
in a piece of new business, that hey, we got to hire more people.
Yeah.
That sent me through the moon. I mean, I love that more than I loved getting the commission checks. It was a very rough period. Along with this, too, there was a legal matter where uh, I ended up filing suit against a former employer uh, for basically, well, related to the injury. I got to be careful what I say here. Uh, it was somewhat related to the injury and the treatment afterwards, and it wasn't just a suit. This went all the way to trial. It was a 2 week long trial. The whole the whole process took like 9 years,
Oh
and
my.
rather than being focused on uh, God and my family, I was focused on providing for my family and the lawsuit. I became very obsessed um, with the lawsuit to some degree,
Mhm.
which is not a place you want to be because probably some of the best advice I got was from my lawyer concerning this at our first meeting. When I told him what I wanted to get out of it, and he said, "Well, you're looking for justice," and he goes,
Mhm.
"And that's not what we have in our system. We have a legal system. We do
Yeah.
not have a justice system."
Mhm.
Um, and uh, yeah, he was right.
Wow.
So uh, during this time, uh, after I'd been in the church about 10 years and out of communion,
Mhm.
you know, for a number of years. Ended up going through a divorce,
Mhm.
uh, which was not a surprise to anyone who knew us. Um, and I ended up uh, finding a beautiful woman, a lovely woman, my beloved wife Susan,
Mhm.
who I'm still married to today. And uh, I didn't start getting serious about my faith until after my injury, which is a debilitating injury, forced me into retirement.
Mhm.
It wasn't until I could get out of the rat race. It wasn't until I could stop being on the road, 3, 4, 5 days a week,
Mhm.
um, that I really got serious about my faith. And I wish I could say that, I came to it through maturity and this and that. No, 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 no. All through my business career, uh, I had this idea of, when I retire, I wanted to have uh, a Boston whaler, so I could go fishing on, and I
Mhm.
wanted to have a place in the woods that I could shoot deer off the back. That was my picture. To anyone who goes to these, seminars, about goal setting and stuff like that, they're like,
Mhm.
picture what you want. It's
Mhm.
like, okay, that's what I want.
Mhm.
I had made my number, and it's like, I got everything I wanted, right?
Mhm.
And I just remember I'm sitting out on Lake Michigan, and I caught a beautiful steelhead, uh, and I'm looking at the bottom of my Boston whaler. It's like, and it's like, is this it?
Wow.
Is this it?
Mhm.
This is. It was extremely, extremely depressing. I had, all of my material goals, and it was just hollow, just absolutely hollow.
Mhm.
Um, so that's when I started getting active. And first, I became a paid volunteer for a nonprofit
Mhm.
that worked with disabled adult men, and I was a job coach for them. I would they would have jobs in restaurants, in the kitchens, and I would be with them to be their coach, to make sure, for the employer that everything was done properly.
Mhm.
And it was great, working with those disabled men. It was very humbling. Um, I personally, I think everyone should probably spend at least 40 hours uh, of their life uh, just being around working with developmentally disabled adults. Um,
Mhm.
if you if spending a week with them doesn't change your life, then I don't know what to say. Um,
Mhm.
so I started doing that, and then the parish we were attending was a Bulgarian parish
Mm.
in Baroda, Michigan. Shout out to Father Gregory Owen.
Mhm.
And after we were there a while, Father Gregory had been active in prison ministry for almost 20 years, I think, at that time, even before he was a priest. I think even when he was a deacon.
Mhm.
And he asked me if I'd be interested in going to prison with him for a visit. I said sure, and so I did. I went for the first visit, and then if you wanted to go for further visits within the year, you had to sign up as a volunteer and go through criminal background checks, medical checks, and some orientation classes and things like that.
Mhm.
So after attending my first divine liturgy behind bars, I decided, yes, I want to do this.
Mhm.
And I signed up and became a volunteer. And there was myself and another layman, and we were there every week. And we had the priests. Um, for people new to the church, Orthodox priests are very, very busy.
Yes.
So we had four priests on a weekly rotation who would come through. But us two lay volunteers, we were there every week. And the thing with prison ministry is about 90% of the work can be done by lay people. Yeah, because 90% of the work is dealing with the prison administration. And you
Mm.
don't need priests to deal with the prison administration. That's a waste of their time.
Mhm.
Um, so it's dealing with the prison administration. And it's one time when we were driving to prison, I asked Father, what am I supposed to be doing?
Yeah.
And that's when he told me, it's like, well, when you came into the Orthodox Church, you're authorized to minister the minor mysteries of the church.
Mhm.
Okay, what are the minor mysteries? It's
Yeah.
like, well, it's talking, it's it's fellowship, it's inviting people to church, it's sharing their grief, sharing their joy. These are the minor mysteries of the church.
Wow.
And that's pretty much what I did. So for a number of years before the global events of
Mhm.
2020 and 2021,
Mhm.
um, I'd spend several days a week working with developmentally disabled adult men, and then I'd spend my Saturdays inside Michigan City, Indiana State Prison, which is uh, in the process of being closed if it isn't closed already. It was the state's maximum security prison.
Mhm.
It's a nasty prison. It's where they execute their prisoners there. In fact, the chapel is like right across the sidewalk from the death house.
Wow.
Um, yeah, that's pretty intense.
Yeah.
Um, and I will say this: I got a lot more out of it than I ever put into it. I
Mhm.
got so much out of it, um, just on so many levels. Uh, Christ tells us that he pretty much commands us, to go visit him in prison.
Mhm.
Um, it's really difficult to do that in the United States. It really is,
Yeah.
because in order to visit a prisoner, you have to be on their visitor list. And I'm here to tell you, there are not a whole lot of Orthodox Christians who end up going to prison.
Mhm.
Um, the community that we had there in Michigan City was as I understood it to be, the oldest Orthodox Christian community inside a U.S. prison. Um, there was a prisoner there who was interested in becoming Orthodox, and he wrote bishops of the various jurisdictions and uh, Metropolitan Joseph of Bulgaria
Mm-hmm.
uh, uh, answered. And so the prison was actually under the Bulgarian Patriarchate.
Wow.
But it was served by priests from four different jurisdictions.
Mm-hmm.
We had one from Goarch, we had one from the Romanian Episcopate, we had Father Gregory, and there was another priest there who was OCA
Mm-hmm.
from time to time.
Yeah. And so you would go there and visit them and talk with them and help them, talk about things related to the faith. And is there any specific story that you want to share that kind of like highlights like the work you were able to do there?
A typical visit for us when there was
Mm-hmm.
a priest, which was most of the time, was we had divine liturgy in prison.
Mm-hmm.
And for me personally, I had a desire to go uh, because of my personal history, um, being in the church and then choosing to be divorced. I can't approach the altar. I can't come close to the altar. I can never be tonsured. I mean, just, I accept that. That's the consequences.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the old altar boy in me still wanted to be close to the altar, and I wanted to know. And it was absolutely fantastic. The priest would come in and immediately begin the proscomidi, while the prisoners would uh, uh, arrange the altar, and we had icons, we had incense. The prisoners loved the incense.
Yeah.
Uh, um, we had beeswax candles. Um, I mean, it's just field expedient, chapel orthodoxy.
Yeah.
And uh, I don't know if you haven't experienced Orthodox Christianity in a chapel type setting. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if you really have.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, all of these men were all baptized in prison. They
Wow.
had never they had never experienced a divine liturgy outside of prison. This was all they knew, and the singing was horrible. But
Yeah.
it was the most beautiful, horrible singing, I've ever heard in my life. I
Yeah.
mean, it was quite something. Um, the one story, there's a lot of stories I got, but
Mm-hmm.
a story I can share um, is well, I'm concerned. I can't. I'm concerned about what I share because in the state of Indiana, Orthodox Christianity is rather strong in the prison system there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I want to abide by all the rules that they gave us at orientation.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to proselytize and talk about experiences with people of other faith and,
Mm-hmm.
other people,
Yeah.
yeah, who call themselves Christians. So I won't talk about that, but I
Mm-hmm.
will share this. Um, One of the things they told us at these orientations is, these guys, this is the maximum security prison. Everyone there has got more than 10 years to do.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone there has nothing but time. So these guys will watch you and they'll just watch you, and then they'll test you. And we had a guy who he was an older man. I'd say at the time he was late 50s, early 60s,
Mm-hmm.
and he had some difficulty uh, moving around, and you could tell from his tattoos, because that's another thing they teach you is how to read prison tattoos.
Mm-hmm.
You could tell from his tattoos that, excuse me, uh, uh, he had a violent uh, gang background. I'll just leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and anyhow, for years, he just watched me. In the chat, I would, say hi, and he didn't want to talk. He would just watch me. And sometimes, occasionally, we'd ha- we'd have divine liturgy, and we'd try to do it as quickly as we could. Um, so the homily, rather than being during the divine liturgy, was afterwards, and quite often the homily was Father would just say, "Let's talk," and yeah, we would, the men would share, what was going on in the prison, and
Mm-hmm.
we would share what was going on, out on the street, and anyhow, it was during one of these times. Again, this guy had, you know, I don't think he'd done more than grunt to me um, for a couple of years,
Yeah.
maybe 3 years or more. I don't know.
Wow.
Anyhow, I sat down next to him, and just out of the blue, he looks me dead in the eye, and he says, "You're probably gonna have to bleep this out. I don't know," but he says, "My mother was a whore, and by the time I was 10 years old, I saw 5 men murdered because she was property of a, leave the motorcycle gang name out." Um, and like, what do you say to that? I mean, what do you
Yeah.
say to that? I mean, that's where I mean, so the only thing I that it would, I said, "Oh, geez, I thought I had a crappy mom." Yeah, yeah, and well, thank God we both got the Holy Theotokos. And when I said that, his eyes just started to tear over, and he got all misty, and he began to gush, just gush, talking about his love for the Holy Theotokos.
Wow.
And it was like, it was, whoa. I mean, and afterwards, I was driving back with Father, and I related that to him, and he just shook his head up and down. And he said, "All of these men, all of them," he goes, "none of them can truly start to repent until they learn to love the Holy Theotokos."
Wow.
And it's the truth, because, um, these men who are in prison, uh, America's called prison nation. We've got one of the most incarcerated populations, and we have the most incarcerated population in the world. Why is
Mm-hmm.
that? Um, uh, Even if you're not Orthodox, I think as an American citizen, I think we owe it to ourselves to go inside the prisons and see what's being done. How are we treating, what's happening here? What's the problem? Why do we have more people in prison than any other country in the world?
Yeah.
And I think the Romanian priest, Father Aline, uh, uh, I think he summed it up, because he grew up in Romania.
Mm-hmm.
When he came to the United States after 2000, he didn't speak a word of English, and he told the prisoners a story about how, when he was a teenager in Romania in the 80s under Ceausescu, there was a priest in his town who would ring the bells, the church bells, every day at noon. He said one day he asked his local priest, "Father, why do you ring the bells? We have no services." And the father pointed to a prison, not a short distance away, and he said, "Because in that prison there are men who have no daylight. They're in cells where they don't have any light, and the only way they know how time is passing is to hear the church bells." So
Wow.
he had related that story, and as we're walking out of the prison, it was a long walk to the parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I asked him. I said, "Well, how do American prisons, compare to Romanian prisons?" And without skipping a beat, he just said, "Barbaric." that kind of took me back. I'm an American. I still have some sinful pride in being an American.
Mhm.
And what do you mean? What do you mean it's barbaric? He said it's the sentencing. Um, in the former Soviet Union countries, in the Orthodox countries, except for Belarus, there
Mhm.
is no death penalty. Um, the longest a man's going to get sent away to prison is about 20 years. And Father Lean said it's because we know men change. So I asked him for an example. I said, okay, one man kills another man in a bar fight. What's he going to get? It's like 20 years, because that's 20 years is like the max, because those countries recognize that age has a lot to do with criminal behavior. And also,
Mhm.
too, in those prisons today, um, they have access to, I'm talking about the former Soviet prison, the prisons in former Soviet countries. They have far more access to education and vocational training and religious services than uh, even prisoners in our minimum securities have.
Mhm.
In most Orthodox countries, their religious services are available daily to a prisoner if they want to attend. They can also get vocational training and things like that.
Wow.
In America, we have all of these men who, for the most part, as boys, were raised on the fringes of society in some of the worst home situations you could possibly imagine, who they offend, and we put them in a warehouse for a couple of few years. We don't teach them anything. All they learn is what they learned from other prisoners, and they come out and then they reoffend, and nobody's surprised. And then we lock them away. And in the 90s, we were putting teenagers away for life. Um, we had a guy in our program who was one of those teenagers who was convicted of a double homicide as a teenager, uh, who, as I understand, I believe he's been released under prison sentencing reform. Uh, on top of that, one of the things they tell you going into prison ministry is, don't believe the prisoners.
Mhm.
Don't believe them. They're going to tell you they didn't do it, this and that.
Yeah.
This guy, yeah, he didn't do it. Um, there was a horrible, horrible double axe murder outside of Indianapolis.
Mhm.
And this guy, as an angry teenager, had had an argument with the victim the day before, but he didn't do the axe murder. The guy who did do the axe murder was caught and convicted. They were both convicted.
Mm.
Um, our man, the Orthodox man in Michigan City, he was convicted only on the testimony of uh, the actual murderer. And
Wow.
when he got in prison, he recanted a year later. So even though he recanted his testimony, this other guy who was convicted as a teenager, he was still doing time like 20 years later. And on his part, he had fear. A lot of these guys are afraid to go out on the outside. I mean, imagine being a. I mean, he had never driven a car. He had never dated a girl. He'd never been to a high school dance. All
Mhm.
this guy knew was prison, you
Yeah.
know, and we just do a horrible job as a nation in our prisons. Uh, we absolutely do. And uh, I'm very happy to see the reforms that I've seen coming under the first Trump administration. Um, but we got to go a lot farther. I think we need to take a look at how we approach crime and criminals,
Hmm.
especially first offenders. So
Yeah.
I got a lot of others. I got a lot of other stories, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
have a beer with me sometime.
Yeah. Or maybe we'll have to do a part two. I'm sure, if people are interested, please like comment below because I would love to do a part two sometime. I have a lot more questions, but the final question I wanted to ask you, after that great story, and I think prison ministry is really important. A lot of people don't even know about it, but it is important to do if you're called. You can really help people in a really transformative way in the prisons. But um,
Well,
I,
I would also add too that there are many prisons.
mhm,
Every time you see a nursing home, there's a prison there. That's a prison.
mhm.
Um, go volunteer,
Yeah,
go visit them at a nursing home. Go, just go play cards with them for an hour.
mhm.
You know,
Yeah,
that's a prison. You'll get far more out of it than you'll ever put into it. I guarantee it.
yeah, definitely. So my last question for you is, being an Orthodox convert of over 20 years now, and you've had all this life experience and helped in these different ministries. What advice would you give to a new convert to Orthodox Christianity?
Do your prayers. Do your prayers. And just statistically, if a husband and a wife spend 20 minutes to get a day praying, they will not get divorced. I mean, it's
Hmm.
statistically, it's under 1%.
Hmm.
And if you're Orthodox and doing your prayers 20 minutes a day, I'm sure it's 0%.
Yeah.
Um, and even if, especially if you're in a situation where you're traveling for work, have a prayer routine in your family where you call twice a day to pray. Pray with your family. It's something I didn't do with my children, and I'm my children and I are suffering the consequences of it today.
Yeah. I think that's the best advice is, it's one thing to, know orthodoxy is true, but to actually like live that out daily and praying daily, it's it's easy to just like do something every once in a while, but daily, sticking to a habit, it is that's what's going to bring us the most growth and help us grow closer to God, help us grow closer to the people that we're praying with. And I love all the written the theology of prayer in Orthodoxy. I think is so beautiful, and we have all these great prayer books like the Jordanville prayer book. There's this other prayer book that I have. I forget who it's by, but it has a lot of the prayers of the saints, and reading their prayers, just getting into that mindset of this is a prayer a saint wrote, and by reciting it, you start to really acquire that mindset that they have, and you're like, wow, they were like really repentant of their sin, and they knew how far away they were from God. And so if we can acquire that and have that for ourselves, have that humility and repentance, that I mean that's the point uh, of Christian life, is that's how we're gonna get closer to God and receive His grace.
Say the Jesus prayer all the
Yeah,
time. Say
Jesus
it all the
prayer.
time. You
And
know, um, that's another habit I didn't pick up for my first 10 years.
yeah, yeah,
You know,
the
I
mhm.
unfortunately, it took me 10 years and a lot of heartache and pain, uh, you know, because I'm stubborn and stupid,
Mhm.
to finally come around.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, our entire life should be a prayer. It's like just thinking, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Um, the monastics are saying this constantly. If you're doing the dishes, to be thinking about the Jesus prayer. You're doing yard work, think about the Jesus prayer. Whatever you're doing is like just having that. And I mean, not only does it bring us closer to God, but it also brings so much peace. Is there's so many distractions in the modern world, and we can have so many things on our mind because we're exposed to so much information, but just thinking that Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner, or you're trying to go to sleep at night. Well, I know a lot of people have trouble falling asleep because you're thinking about things, but just thinking that Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner, just focusing on the words, it brings me so much peace. And then whenever I do it, I'm like, why didn't I do this earlier? It's like, this is what I should have been doing. I should have been uh, living this prayer. Like, the answer is so simple. It's right in front of us, and we just have to live it.
Well, also too, begin every task with prayer.
Yeah.
Just
Yes. Uh-huh.
every it helps, and
Yeah.
psychologists will put some mumbo jumbo on it, and tell you that it's focused. It's like, yeah, no, begin every task with prayer, because
Yeah.
I find when I don't do that, that's when I screw things up.
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
know, um, but when you begin every task with prayer, yeah, it puts you in the right mindset, and that's how we're supposed to be living.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's really interesting too, because if you look up like prayer before this or that, like whatever it is, there's an Orthodox prayer for almost anything that you can think of. So it's
If we're
always, yeah.
if we're speaking of prayer books, I have to get a plug in for one.
Mm-hmm.
Orthodox Christian Prison Ministries.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't understand what they do. What they do is they're essentially uh, uh, a support service for uh, ministries, and they offer books free to prisoners. And they have an excellent number of books there. And when you buy a book goes to a prisoner. If you're already Orthodox, I highly recommend the OCPM, Orthodox Christian Prison Ministry um, prayer book.
Mm-hmm.
It's the entire rule of Saint Basil the Great, so it has your entire 24-hour list of services. It was edited by Father Josiah Trenum long time ago,
Wow.
so that as an individual, even if you're by yourself, you can live the prayer life of an Orthodox Christian monastic, just by following the prayers in the book. And I'm here to tell you, I've spent some time living the entire cycle, and it's exhausting. It absolutely is. But it's an excellent book. It has all the services in it, and on top of that, when you buy a book, there's a book that's going to go to a prisoner.
Wow. Yeah, definitely. Is there a website or that we
If
can?
you just Google Orthodox Christian Prison Ministry,
Uh-huh.
OCPM,
Yeah.
it should pop up. I want to say it's a ministry of the Antiochian Church.
Okay, yeah, that would make
Um,
sense. Yeah.
yeah, and there's a number of resources there. And when you support them, you're supporting getting those books into the prisoners.
Yeah.
And a lot of times too, it's those books that first spark a prisoner's interest, because like I said before, you can't be a visitor unless you're on someone's list. Well, a lot of times it's easier to get a book into a prison or a jail than it is to get that first visit. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times, I've heard stories from other folks about how a prisoner got this book and they called us.
Wow.
And that's how it started.
Glory to God. I think this is a great place to end it. I would love to have another conversation in the future
Oh, I
going in.
would too. This was fun.
Yeah, it was.
We haven't even got to, like,
Yeah.
how we ran away to become hillbillies, and in the Ozarks. And
Yeah.
um, on top of that too, I think I could maybe connect you with one or two men who used to be in prison, who became Orthodox in prison,
Oh yeah.
that might be interested in talking to you.
Yeah, I would love to do that if they're interested. And I think that that last note that we left on about prayer and maybe trying this prayer rule of Saint Basil is like, as we're going into Lent, this is something to consider, of like trying, maybe not the full thing, but maybe like parts of it is like really, as we're going into Lent, try and go. It's like we're having it's spiritual boot camp is Lent. in preparation
Yeah,
for
maybe
Pascha.
just do the full Vesper service with your family,
Yeah.
which
Hmm.
is the same. It's basically the same service that you would have in church.
Hmm.
So make your house a little church, and
Yes.
get and have the Vesper service there,
Yeah.
and start that way.
Yeah. Exactly.
Also, too, if you find you can't sleep at 2 o'clock in the morning, you
Yeah.
know,
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. Everyone, leave any comments if you have any questions. God bless.
thank you.